Hey guys, this is John. I'm playing Kun07 in the 15-minute pool in ICC. Let me just check my opponent real quick before I decide what to do on move 1. 28 wins, 5 losses, 1 draw for this guy. Let's play D4. Hasn't played anything but 15-minute. Good record, though, so far. Sometimes I like to take a look at what their recent games have looked like. Yeah, they're doing very well. Lots of wins right there. Okay, so tough opponent. Should be a good game. Knight f6, let's play c4. My rating has taken a little bit of a hit recently, but we can always climb back. I was about to say climb black. We can always climb back. And we get a Nimzo-Indian. Let's play queen c2. So in a game I had against Glotti 4 the other day, they played knight c6. They played the Zurich variation. And let's see what black does. Castles is the main line, but c5 and d5 all get played as well. So lots of moves at black's disposal. I'll play a3, just the most straightforward, trying to get the bishop pair. This is the main idea of the queen c2 line, is that you're defending the knight with the queen so you can recapture and avoid damaging your pawn structure. And usually black plays b6 and bishop b7 and proceeds from there. I had a game in the recent UT Dallas Fall FIDE Open in this same line. It's quite a reliable line for black. It leads to rich positions where white has the bishop pair, but black has a solid structure, and it's hard to breach black's defenses if they play it correctly. Okay, let's play e3. And usually d6 followed by knight bd7 will be played. And I might do the same thing that I did in that game from the UT Dallas Fall FIDE Open. I played Nadezhda Kosentsova, and in that game I played knight e2 and tried to get the knight to c3 eventually. So I think I will do that now. And after knight bd7, it's usually wise for white to play queen c2, so as to avoid any possibility of knight e4, attacking the bishop and also the queen. Because if you were to play rook d1 here, they can go knight e4, bishop takes d8, knight takes c3, and the rook on d1 would be under attack. So it's most accurate to retreat the queen right now. It's a prophylactic move. And we'll continue with knight c3 and rook d1 very soon anyways. h6, kicking the bishop. Let's keep that bishop pair. Absolutely, we don't just want to play bishop takes f6 and give up the bishop pair without a fight. If white were to do that, there would be no trace of an advantage. So we have to be judicious about when we trade off those pair of bishops. And black just breaks in the center with e5. Interesting. Certainly possible to do that. So that gives me the option of playing d5 if I want to shut out the light square bishop. I could also play rook d1 and try to keep the tension a little bit. I have a feeling, though, if rook d1 is played, they might go something like g5, bishop g3, and then maybe go after the bishop, like knight h5. Although technically they could do that if I play d5 as well. I think I'm leaning slightly towards playing d5, but rook d1 also makes a good deal of sense. Yeah, I'm going to close it down. I'll play the advance, try to block out this piece. Maybe black will play c6, either now or very soon, to try to open the diagonal for the bishop. Yep, and black does that. So I'm thinking take and then maybe follow with rook d1 once again, or take and then follow with knight c3. So let's do this. Obviously, black will take with the bishop. There's no other move. And then after this, should I play rook d1 or knight c3? I was leaning towards rook d1, attacking the d6 pawn. But might be something to be said about knight c3 first, too. For instance, if rook d1, g5, bishop g3, what about knight e4? Defending d6 and attacking the bishop. It looks like an active try that could give me some headaches. So maybe better to play knight c3 first. Yeah, let's play it that way. We'll try to be flexible. A lot of times in this line, white has trouble developing the light square bishop without dropping the g2 pawn. So that's one thing I have to bear in mind. I might need to play like pawn f3 first in an effort to continue with bishop e2. Okay, so rook d1. Rook d1 doesn't really carry with it a threat, so maybe I should play f3 now and try to prepare bishop e2 and castling short. That might be the prudent thing to do. Rook d1, though, does stop black from playing d5. Like, I wonder if f3, g5, followed by d5 could be played. If I play rook d1, what is black likely to do? What would they be up to? Rook d1, g5, bishop g3, knight h5. They could do that plan. Because the virtue of f3 is that I have the f2 square available for the bishop to drop back to. So there's that. But I am wondering about the line f3, g5, let's say bishop f2, and then maybe even e4 right there. e4 might be a good move. Okay, so I'm going to play rook d1 first. It's hard to tell which move order is best, but this one gives me some central presence, and it stops black from playing d5, so I'm going to go out on a limb and play this one. And if g5, bishop g3, knight h5, I'll have to figure out what to do, because I could play bishop e2, attacking the knight, and trying to get him to take, so that after hg I would be attacking the pawn on h6. But I wonder if knight h5, bishop e2, if they could just play bishop takes g2. Perhaps they could. Knight c5. Okay, so I think black's trying to sink a knight into e4 very quickly. So if I play b4 attacking the knight, yeah, knight e4 will be the answer. So maybe I should play f3 and try to cover the e4 square. If f3, they can't play e4 because they would lose the pawn on d6, so that's kind of nice. What about f3, knight h5, though? f3, knight h5, maybe just bishop e2. Knight takes g3, h takes g3, I'm attacking h6, and we can kind of go from there. I do feel like I need to stop knight e4, and I also want to get this piece out, so that's why I like f3, just controlling the e4 square. Yeah, let's play like this. One thing I've noticed in this line, though, is that white can fall behind in development. Like, this line is great if white gets organized and gets castled and can get into a middle game where that bishop pair might matter. The times where white gets in trouble in this line are scenarios where they're a couple tempos behind in development, and black is able to capitalize on that. So I'm hopeful that that is not what's happening here, but you never know. Okay, so I could play bishop f2 and try to keep that bishop pair, but I think it's more important to get castled and get developed, so that's why I'm thinking bishop e2 right now. Bishop e2, knight takes g3, h takes g3, attack the pawn on h6. Yeah, let's do that. And I'll pre-move this capture as well. At least then the pawn on h6 will be under attack, so I look forward to that. Still, e4 is not playable because of bishop takes d6. If they want to play e4, they have to eliminate my bishop first. They're going g4. This move crossed my mind briefly, but I didn't think they would do it this early. So if I take, is the idea bishop takes g2 or knight takes g3 first? Probably if I take, bishop takes g2 is the plan. And then if I take h5, they take h1. And black is arguing that I don't have compensation for having given up the exchange. And they might have a point. Maybe I don't. g4 is kind of annoying because it also makes way for queen g5. Maybe I should play bishop f2. Take the opportunity to save my bishop. There's also queen h5. What's up with queen h5? Queen h5 attacks the knight on h5. And then let's say knight takes g3, h takes g3. I'd be hitting this pawn again. Oh, also if queen f5, knight takes g3, I have queen takes g4 check in between move. So maybe that's worth consideration. Queen f5, let's say g takes f3. G takes f3. I'm still hitting the knight. It's nice. Knight g7 maybe, attacking the queen. I could play the queen back to c2. Things are opening up a little bit on that wing. Maybe queen f5 is decent. I'm going to try it. We'll take a flyer on this move. Attack the knight. My queen wasn't doing a whole heck of a lot on c2 anyways, so maybe this is prudent. Come in and attack the knight. I don't see a way that black can like trap my queen or anything, so on the whole, I think this should be fine. I predict they'll take on f3. I think that's the main point of black's play. And if they take on f3, I'll probably take with a pawn, because if I take with the bishop, I've messed up my structure a little bit. Although I would be hitting the bishop here, so there is something to be said for that. They do take on f3. If I take h5, they'll take e2, hitting my rook. And I may not have time to like gather their h6 pawn, for instance. So bishop takes or g takes f3. If bishop takes, knight takes g3, h takes g3, bishop takes f3, g takes f3. I'm still on this pawn. That's kind of nice. I'm actually kind of coming around to bishop takes f3. I didn't think I was going to do that, but I mean, why should I take with the pawn? Why not the bishop? That's the more active move. Bishop takes f3, there is knight g7. And then maybe queen h3, attacking the pawn. Okay, let's try it. Because I think if I could eliminate this bishop, then I get access to the d5 square. And that could be very helpful if ever I want to plant my knight in there. And I got to speed up a little bit, clearly. I don't want this time to catch up with me. So the knight does go to g7. Now queen h3 was my intention. Is there any issue with like queen h3, bishop d7? Nah, at the very least I can always go queen h4. So, yeah, this looks okay. Let's pre-move this capture. So we're hitting that pawn, and also the bishop is under attack, so yeah, the exchange of the bishops makes a lot of sense. Maybe just king h7 now for black. And if knight d5, they could play queen e6, offering a trade. They play queen e6 anyways, just right away. So apparently unafraid of the trade. I think I virtually have to trade because they're also attacking c4. So I'm just going to play that right away. I guess their idea is take with the pawn, and then they're on f3. So if rook takes d6, they would take on f3. I don't know, though. That seems like a reasonable swap for me. Rook takes d6. Rook takes here. I can't take on e5 because of rook takes. Rook takes d6, rook takes f3, king e2. They can double up their rooks. Maybe that's a little annoying. Because knight f5 is always in the air. Rook takes d6, rook takes f3, king e2. Rook af8. Yeah, I don't like their activity right there. That's the only thing. If king e2 right away, I think knight f5 is going to be the answer. I think I'm going to do this anyways, though. I wasn't liking rook takes d6, rook takes f3. Black gets a lot of activity in that line, and I think e3 is pretty weak. So I'll allow them to play knight f5, and we'll see how it goes from here. Maybe knight f5, I should play bishop f2, and then look to play e4. Okay, they're going to do this instead. If b4, you'd have to play knight b7. Are you okay with that? What about knight b5 right now, attacking d6 and also a7? Does that win a pawn? Looks like it does. Huh. Okay, let's do that. How does black avoid going down a pawn now? I also could have played b4, knight b7, knight b5, but I'm wondering about c4. I just don't want c4 to become too weak. Oh yeah, and actually knight b7 would assist in the defense of d6, so this is probably a better way to do it, if I'm going to do it. So black is doubling me up on time right now, but it appears I'm going to win a pawn. All right, let's just take. I was just looking at if e4 gives black counterplay. It might. e4, f takes e4. Knight takes g3 check, h takes g3, knight takes e4. h6 is hanging. Yeah, they're going to go for it. I almost have to take that pawn. Because I don't know if allowing knight to into d3 is pleasant for me. Okay, I'm going to take. Let's see if they take here. Knight takes e4 instead. Okay, so bishop back to e1, trying to cover everything. Looks sensible. Otherwise, I have a hard time defending against the threat of knight takes g3 followed by rook f2 or maybe even knight f2. So I'm up a pawn, but I'm less coordinated than black is, and I have less time. So stay tuned to see what happens. Rook a8. It's a strange move. It's the idea of rook a4. All right, I'm just going to play my knight out. I don't have a lot of time to ruminate over what my opponent is up to. I mean, if rook a4, I can always just play pawn b3. Here I'm threatening knight to c7, attacking the rook and also the pawn on e6. Rook c4. Okay, let's just defend that pawn. If d5 takes, rook into c2 check. King d3. Then the rook would be under attack, and so would the knight. E5 instead, okay. Maybe bishop b4? Or knight back to c3? Knight back to c3, they might trade and then play b5. So I don't know if I like the look of that. So let's play this one. See if I can tie down this rook. Maybe I can convince one of his rooks to go and defend the d-pawn. And I can put my bishop to use. It's finally just not sitting around on e1. So if take, they get rook f2 in is the point. Okay. Maybe rook g1. Let's go rook g1. Take the file. Yeah, if I grabbed on d6, I was seeing some bad stuff involving rook f2. Like they'll take with this knight, and then this rook would come into f2. So I think rook g1 makes sense to try to get some presence down the file. Maybe rook g4, attack that knight. So hit that piece. Knight f2, I think I could just take it. And I don't see any discoveries that are going to kill me. Discoveries with this piece, that is. Knight c5, okay, so that makes my task a little simpler. At least I get to trade one pair of pieces. Now maybe if they take with the b-pawn, I can try to run the a-pawn. I think taking with the other pawn is pretty undesirable. All right, let's put this pawn to work. Run the a-pawn. 2 minutes, 30 seconds. This is going to be tough. But I feel like I'm consolidating my extra pawn now. Maybe get this rook back. I'm not seeing what it's up to on g4 anymore, so maybe rook f1 now that that move is playable. I might also play a rook behind, like rook a1, and try to push a5. Let's go rook f1. If he doubles up the rooks, a5 is looking nice. Knight takes d6 is a threat, isn't it? Can I do that now? I cannot. I can give a check and then play the other rook over if I want. But that takes away an attacker on d6. I can play e4, but knight d4 is going to be the answer. Knight c7, followed by knight d5. Not super convincing.
Check.
Okay, I'm going to repeat once, just see what happens. And then maybe bring the other rook over, rook df1, I'm thinking. I think having this rook on the g file is actually kind of helpful. So let's do this. It might compel this rook to come over, and then I'm thinking a5 could be good. Try to distract him by running the pawn. He could play rook f to f8. Goes rook g6 instead. Okay, so let's take that. And then I'm going to play rook d1 next move. Just pre-move this move. So that could entice rook a6 or rook d8. At least that's my hope. If rook a6, then he's very tied down to the defense of this pawn. So he's going to go for a counterattack. Let's push the a-pawn now. Don't know if I like taking d6 as much, although that's certainly an option. Take d6, take b3. Check, king f6, check here. Oh, that's actually pretty good. But you know what? I think I'm going to run the a-pawn. I think that's simpler. If rook a8, rook a1, and then should that knight move, I just grab a d6. Minute 12 now. So I'm pinning my hopes on my a pawn. He might need to rush over with his king, but once my pawn hits a7, then it's like a real big factor in the position. So let's go here. If rook c6, I think I can just push, actually. Rook c6, a6, rook takes c7, a7. Yeah, he can't stop. He'd have to give up his rook for the pawn. Actually, regardless of where his rook goes, I can play a6 next move. Yeah, and if he takes a7, then he's going to be down in exchange and fighting for his life. I'm going to pre-move this move because virtually the only move that makes sense where a7 would be played is if he takes on c7. I think he should, because otherwise I bring the knight back to b5 and I push a7 anyways. So it looks like he's going to lose that. And we're getting closer on time. He still holds almost a 3-to-1 time advantage, but I'm going to be winning material, and I'm optimistic I can win this. The only thing is, once he gives up the exchange and we get to that rook first knight endgame, his pawns are all defended for the moment, but I can sneak in with my king. My king's going to get a lot more activity. It looks like I'm going to win. So he either has to take now or play rook c8. King g5, I'll play king f3, so probably king f3 will be my next move, almost no matter what. He could play e4 maybe to try to shut me out. He's going to do that. Interesting. Yeah, that's a good move. Okay, let's bring the rook back. e4 keeps the king at bay, so that's annoying. Maybe he'll try to bring the king up to f6 and just hold that way. But e4 could be a weakness too. Like if I get in a position to attack it, then watch out. So here I'm trying to invade on either g8, or if his king comes to e5, like maybe even the g5 square. He's getting low on time. Okay, so there.
Check.
How about check and then rook f4 next move? You can play the knight back to f5, and if rook f4, king here. Well, at any rate, I think it makes sense to repeat once. Oh, he's going to allow me to do this. Didn't think he'd want to do this. Because now if knight f5, rook e8 check, and I pick up that e4 pawn. Yeah, I think knight f5 was stronger on the previous move for him. Yeah, let's play h3. If knight f6, probably rook f7. You could put the pawn on h4 at some point, but that's a liability, defensive liability if he does. If king e6, rook g7, I think will be my answer. I might be able to sneak my king in, like king f2, king g3, king h4. I think black's weaknesses are going to come to tell here. He plays that move. Let's just go here first. Stop knight h5 and also the king coming up. He might be close to being in zugzwang. Because if the knight moves, I get rook h5. Now we pin him, and rook f4 is coming next move. We'll take this pawn.
Check.
I could take on f6 and probably just win, but let's just do this. Try to make it harder for him in time pressure.
Check. Check.
Yeah, now this is going to be an easy win. Okay, and we win the game. So that extra pawn that we were able to grab with knight b5 turned out to be the decisive factor. So right back here when we got knight b5 in. Let's go have a look at this one. So Nimzo-Indian with queen c2, and I played a3.
Check.
Another move I play often here is knight f3 on move 5. It's kind of flexible. You don't commit to a3 yet. But a3 is the main move.
Check.
Yeah, and at this stage, black has a lot of possibilities. d5 is a popular move at the higher levels to try to equalize the game. The way that black played it with b6 is standard. I've even seen the bizarre move queen e8. This move looks like a mouse slip or something, but the idea is that if bishop g5 now, the move that is traditionally desirable for white in this line, black gets in knight e4 and forks the queen and the bishop. So that is playable for black too. So these moves are all normal. Now in the past I played a setup with knight f3 to d2, but I think the more promising setup is knight e2. I've looked at this line a fair amount recently, and I've seen white have the most success with knight e2, and then this plan of queen c2, rook d1, and then knight c3. So that's why I played this way. So here, a common move order mistake would be rook d1, and that would allow knight e4, forking the queen and the bishop. Yes, that allows white to take here, but after knight takes c3, black regains the queen, and they're also attacking here. So white would have to take the black knight, and then black would be able to take the bishop, and it's equal material, and white no longer has the bishop pair, so I don't think white has anything right now. So that's why I played queen c2 first, to prepare knight c3 and also take the sting out of knight e4. So in my game with Kun07, she played c5, which is a more standard way to try to attack white's structure. I haven't seen the plan that black employed here very often. So h6 and then e5. The engine kind of likes it, but I found in these positions the engine isn't the most reliable indicator of what's truly going on. So take. Yeah, and here I played knight c3. I think it makes sense to play d5. I mean, I thought about like maintaining the tension here, but d5 seems consistent with trying to cramp black and maybe build a space advantage if they don't address the pawn on d5. It did cross my mind like maybe black could play b5 and try to attack this mini structure, destabilize the d5 pawn. And then the engine likes knight c3, b takes c4, bishop takes c4. This says the game is roughly equal. Yeah, white still holds the bishop pair, so I wonder if black could do something like g5 here, knight b6, attacking this and this. Bishop a2, and is it dangerous for them to go after the pawn? Probably. h4, g4, take. Bishop takes. Bishop takes, knight takes, rook d1. Okay, and white's getting a lot of compensation because if the knight moves away, there's bishop takes e5 using the pin. So that's just an illustrative line, but I was thinking black might try to attack this mini pawn chain in a different way, like b5. But they played c6, looks fine. Knight to c3, queen e7, rook over to d1. Yeah, if I get coordinated, I would have a small advantage, I think. I like my pressure against the backward d6 pawn. I like my control of the d-file. So if white manages to play like bishop e2 and castles, white would be more comfortable, for sure. So here black played g5, attacking my bishop. Now knight c5. And I played f3. f3 is not a move you're usually like thrilled to make as white, but you kind of have to because otherwise the bishop is attacking g2, and you may not be able to develop this light square bishop without losing that pawn. And here it does have the benefit of controlling e4, so I stop black from playing like, for instance, knight f e4, hitting my bishop on g3. So knight h5, and here I went bishop e2. The engine really likes b4. b4 attacking the knight. knight e6, and then bishop f2. And it's ecstatic about white's position here. Yeah, it looks better for white. I'll probably develop my bishop and castle, and maybe in this way I'm controlling these two squares well, and I'm giving black less counterplay than they had in the game. Like now g4 just doesn't make any sense. I could even just take the pawn. So I played bishop e2, and they played this g4 move, and this really surprised me. So I think they're trying to like open the diagonal here. So if f takes g4, I think bishop takes is the idea. Maybe I should have looked at a line like this a little bit further. Rook takes g2, knight takes e2, queen takes e2. But I was reluctant to open the position any more than I had to. And queen f5, once I started looking at queen f5, seemed like a good move, attacking the knight and also the pawn. So eventually I just went for it. And black took on f3, and I took with the bishop. Yeah, this was a mildly difficult call. Like, g takes is the move that originally came to mind, but then I started thinking, like, why allow black to keep that bishop on c6? That's a pretty good piece for them. So why not play to exchange? Computer seems to like g takes even more, but let's see what it says about bishop takes f3 all the same. So now black retreats the attack knight. I play queen h3, hitting the pawn on h6. They trade. Yeah, this also looks comfortable. Looks like it's giving an edge to white. Queen e6, that defends the pawn and offers a trade. And now black has to take with the pawn, because if they were to take with one of the knights, I just take d6, I think, pretty much unopposed. And white's got a big advantage. So in taking with the pawn, they open up the rook on f3. Now, I had a bad feeling about this line. If I took d6 and they took there, I didn't like the look of this, because black immediately gains activity down the f-file, and they're threatening the e-pawn. And I can't play bishop takes e5 because rook takes e3 is a fork that just wins for them. So I was looking briefly at, like, rook takes, whoops, not rook d5. Rook takes d6, rook takes here, king e2, rook here. The engine thinks this is good, b4. But you know what? I might have missed that in this line. After king e3, he can actually just take here if he wants. Rook takes e3. King takes, knight f5 check. Forking the king and the rook. I guess I do win e5 maybe at the end. b4, kick the knight away. This is getting kind of weird. What if I just take the pawn on e5? They take c4. Yeah, white probably doesn't have any advantage here. Black is actually up a pawn temporarily. But with the time I had to look at this position, it just seemed to me I was allowing black more activity than they deserve if I played rook takes d6 and allowed rook takes f3. So hence I played king e2, just defending the pawn. He played rook here. Thought he would play knight f5. I didn't think he would want to assign the rook to defend the pawn so quickly. Rook hg1. Yeah, it does look easier to play white's position, though. I mean, I always have the possibility of b4. d6 is pretty weak. I have a bishop and a knight versus two knights. That might confer some small edge. Yeah, looks like a white advantage. So here, and then I went knight b5, rather. Engine seems to think it's okay. So attacking the two weak pawns. Knight f5, I took. They played e4. I took again. Yeah, so maybe here it was better for black to take the bishop first, stopping the bishop e1 idea. Take and then take here. The engine says that white's advantage has shrunk a little bit after this continuation, because not only is this a threat, but so is rook f2. So I have to do something funky. Rook h4, and I guess if rook f2, now I'm doing well after king e1 because they've got two loose pieces. So I assume taking would be a logical move, and then king d3, knight f5, saving the knight and also defending this pawn. The engine says small advantage for white, but this doesn't look clear to me at all. And black even has a passed h-pawn that I'll have to watch in the endgame. So maybe that means that I reacted incorrectly to e4. I didn't want to play f4. I really hated the prospect of shutting down my bishop, and also if I let this pawn survive, then knight d3 could be played, and this knight is going to be a pain to remove. So I didn't want to do that. The engine says rook hf1, just defending f3 a bit better. Okay, yeah, I could see why that would be the best move. But I took here, and black took back, and now I get a chance to play bishop e1, and while my bishop is temporarily passive, I've stopped any incursions with the black knight. The black knights, plural. So, yeah, now, from this point forward, I felt pretty good. I'm not sure rook a8 is the best move. I commented that I thought that move was kind of weird. Putting the rook on a file where it doesn't have much of a future, and forcing my knight back. My knight wants to go back anyways, so I don't know that black should purposefully play rook a8 and force me to retreat. Here I played b3, defending the weak c4 pawn. I played bishop b4, attacking d6. And then rook g1. Yep, that move looks fine, rook g1. I wanted to stop knight g3. Note that black could try knight g3 after bishop b4,
Check.
but it wouldn't
Check.
be worth it for them to do this because they'd be giving up their pair of active knights for one of my rooks that was just sitting in the corner. And I'm going to pick off all their weak pawns, and this is winning for white. I'm certain of it. So he hit his king, king h7. Now, once again, like, this pawn is weak, but I have to watch the f2 square all the time. Like, let's say I were to take with the knight. Well, then knight f takes, bishop takes, and rook f2 check, and suddenly there's a lot of counterplay. I have to play king e1, because if king d3, I lose the bishop here. And I don't know, I didn't want this scenario to arise where I'm up like a couple pawns, but my coordination is terrible. Especially when I'm low on time. This is a prescription for blundering a promising position away. So I think rook g1 is a good way to just keep control over a vital square. Here, and I played rook g4. I'm happy with the way I played this for the most part. It looks like I found some good moves. Yeah, this is a timely trade on c5. I really don't think they want to allow this to happen.
Check.
D takes c5 or d7 check. So they correctly took with the pawn. But now I get a4 going, and this passed pawn on the outside is a problem for them because their knight is so far away. And that knight is needed to defend d6. So this might be technically losing for black. Yeah, I don't think it would be out of the question to say that black is probably just lost here. I think probably the move that really did them in is passing up knight takes g3, and instead doing this and allowing bishop e1. Maybe black can somehow defend better from here, but white has everything under control, and black doesn't have much to show for the pawn. So after a4, black played rook a8. I brought this rook back. I just didn't see what it was doing on g4 anymore, so I figured let's just retreat it and maybe introduce the idea of rook f1. h5 was played. I played rook f1. The engine says king d3, maybe trying for king e4 is a good idea. That would be a nice improvement of the king.
Check.
And here I repeated the position once and then decided to do this. I figured probably it's better to have both rooks pointed at the king side. And here my threat is knight takes d6. Because whichever way black were to take, he would lose either the knight on f5 or the rook behind it on f6. And interesting, the computer says black should just allow that to happen. And it's still pretty dismal for them. Plus almost 3 for white. Probably still a win. But he played rook g6. I swapped. And now I attacked the d6 pawn. He tried to counterattack here. Maybe rook a6 a little more tenacious. I don't know. But rook a6 is probably going to run into similar stuff. It's the game. Although if I play rook a1, he could play rook a5 and maybe try to slow me down. Probably including my king is crucial at some point. Like, yeah, bringing the king up to e4. That helps out a lot. And black will be hopelessly tied down to defending the a-pawn and also defending d6. Yeah, this is probably winning for white. So he went here, and I just started pushing the a-pawn. Get behind it. Rook a6. I thought black's best chance was to try to get the king over to assist in the defense, like something like this. And then king e7, so that the knight could be freed up. But most probably it just doesn't work. Yeah, like now that my pawn hits a7, I'm threatening knight c7, so he'd have to go here. And now my rook is free to roam about. Like maybe even like rook f1 looks pretty good. Knight e7, invade with the rook. Yeah, this is over. Black is just so hopelessly passive here. So he did this, knight c7, pawn a6. Yeah, now he is forced to give up the exchange, because if he doesn't, I'm playing knight b5 and going a7 with a similar scenario to what you just saw. Now the only question is if I can win this with a minute on my clock. Normally when you get into a exchange up ending and there's plenty of pawns on the board, like here we both have 4 pawns, it's a pretty easy win for the side with the rook. But when you're fighting against a knight and the knight is able to defend all of the pawns, like it can be tough to break down the position. I do think this is winning for white, but at the time it didn't seem like that easy. e4 is probably smart, otherwise my king's going to come up. Let's just see if black ever had any chance here.
Check.
And I kind of think, with the time and everything, it's just too tough to hold. Well, here I could have played rook h8 right away, because if knight takes h2, I have rook takes h5 check, winning the knight. At some point, black's going to run out of good moves, or my king is going to get in. Like right here's a good example, or maybe even coming up. Yeah, like right here is a good example, I think. If he moves the knight away somewhere, I get rook g4, attacking both of these pawns. Like say knight here, rook g4, and I'll win something. If he plays the king as he did, I can also get my rook to f4, and that's the death knell for this pawn. So yeah, I think it just takes a little maneuvering from white, and eventually we're going to win.
Check.
And I mentioned one thing I could have played, like right here, for instance. Yeah, I could have simplified, like just take the knight, and then take here, and I'm up 2 pawns, and black can't stop both of them. King e5, h5, take here, h6, and he's 1 square too far. Okay, so I think a good technical game on my part. I was happy with the way I prosecuted my advantage. Black probably missed some counterplay. Like I think passing up knight takes g3 after e4 was critical. I think if knight takes g3 check had been played, he would have had good chances. Maybe I could have played it better somewhere right around here, I'm not sure. But on the whole, not a bad game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And I'll be back again tomorrow with another video. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.